Welcome to Made in Murray, the podcast that focuses on the successes and struggles of local businesses. Let's get started.
My name's G. I'm your host, and today I have the pleasure of Zooming with Simon Cotton, who's the CEO of Johnstons of Elgin. Good afternoon, Simon.
Good afternoon, G.
How would you describe Johnstons to somebody who knows nothing about it? Because obviously some people know a little bit, some people don't know.
So firstly, we're a textile manufacturing company. We manufacture textiles for the best brands in the world, and 2/3 of our turnover comes from making beautiful product for really luxurious brands. About 1/3 of our business is about our own brand. And because of that, we have our own retail stores. So we have 5 retail stores. We have a couple of coffee shops that people might know locally. And we have an online offer as well. So it's quite a complicated business. We're the largest employer in the textile industry in the UK with about 1,000 people. And
Wow.
2/3 of those are here in Moray.
Wow, that's amazing. And that's also a little bit of still an understatement about the company, because the company was established, according to the Wikipedia I read, in 1797. Is that right?
1797, yeah, before my time.
Wow. Which makes it, is it the second oldest company or one of the oldest? Or what is that?
I think it's the second oldest family-owned company in Scotland. And the family owners, this is the second family. So originally there was a Johnson family, and now we have the Harrison family who've owned it and looked after it for the last 100 years.
Wow. And also according to the wiki, the original mill produced linen, flax, oatmeal, and tobacco, but Alexander Johnson, its founder, introduced textiles and phased out the original products. Also, Johnson pioneered the use of tweed for camouflage, and the style became known as Scottish estate tweeds. So there's a lot in the background and a lot in the history of the company, making it what it is known as today, which is a worldwide brand. So how was your journey into the organization? How did you get to this point?
So I joined just over 6 years ago. I'd been in textiles before. I'd been in textiles for 11 years before. But in textiles, you're not a true textile person unless you're in it for about 4 generations. So I'm still an incomer from that point of view. But I've also run manufacturing plants. I'd worked internationally. I'd developed brands. So I'd done a lot of different things which were relevant to what we do at Johnson's. But because there's so many different things, there's a lot of different boxes that you want to tick when you're coming for this kind of role, which is really, I think, a dream job for anybody who's working in textiles.
Absolutely. Now, when we set up to do this interview originally, which was about 4 or 5 months ago, I think we had our first chat, the world looked slightly different from how it looks today. So for that reason, I want to ask you, what's your focus at the moment right now this week? What's important for you right now in terms of your work and your business? Because as I said, the world has changed. Some people would call it a crisis. Some people would call it an opportunity. How do you see this present moment?
Yeah, the world's changed really beyond recognition. I mean, we would never have imagined this situation where we're sitting here today with no manufacturing running, none of our retail stores running, and of our staff, 960 of them roughly are on furlough at the moment. So they're at home now. And of the staff that are still working, most of those are working from home. So it's an incredible situation. And for many, many companies, it's very difficult to imagine that just a few weeks ago, life was pretty normal, and it's changed so very quickly. So what we're working on now is well, what happens next? Closing down was I think the right decision to make at the right time. But now we've got to work out, well, what does that look like when eventually, inevitably, we're going to have to reopen in some way. And then we face a hugely changed world with potentially difficult decisions to make. Customers who we've got to prioritize and get product out the door are the ones who might want to cancel or delay product because demand patterns have changed hugely.
What's the situation in the mill right now? So is it completely shut down? There's zero production?
There's absolutely no production whatsoever. So no weaving going on, no finishing, no sewing, no yarn being produced. There's nothing happening right at this moment.
And do you know if the company has ever had to experience that at any point before in time?
No, I don't know the exact times that we've had to do it. I mean, we've had major events, like we had a massive flood in 1997. We had to stop operations there, and a lot of other looms around the UK, weavers around the UK, really helped us out of that situation. But I think this is unprecedented from the point of view of it has happened very, very suddenly, and we don't know how long it's going to go on. So.
Yeah, I think it happened suddenly for a lot of people. And that was a question that was in the back of my mind. How long did you have to prepare for this? Did you get any time to prepare for this? Because it seemed to a lot of people that it happened almost overnight.
Yeah, I think even a week before we closed down, life was still pretty normal. Meetings were still going on. Conferences in some cases were still going on. Some travel was starting to be restricted, but the flights up from Inverness to London were still pretty full. So it was a very, very quick situation, I would say, from us starting to discuss closing down to it happening. Took us about 2.5 hours, and then we actually closed down the operation completely within 24 hours.
Wow. What was it like being a CEO in that situation, in that position? There must have been quite a lot of pressure on you.
I think it's been pressure on anybody running a business at the moment. The decisions that you're taking are not just about the future of the company. They're also about people's lives. And they're also about the community. And they're not easy ones. Anybody who's sitting out there thinking, well, this is easy, you just take the decision, you close it, and you do that straight away. Well, there's always a point where you've got to make that call. And it's difficult. When you look back, it probably feels easy, but it's difficult at that time. And I think it has been a huge amount of pressure on everyone.
One thing that maybe frustrates me when I look at the whole situation is that there's this terminology used of essential and non-essential businesses. And I think to a certain extent in the economy, almost every business provides some kind of essential service. And a lot of the clothing industry, I think, has been classed as non-essential. So how is the clothing industry taking that kind of categorization?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, if it's your job, it's essential to you. So I understand that argument. But at the end of the day, the view we took was that we couldn't really argue that a cashmere scarf was an essential item in terms of dealing with this particular crisis. And we've had to accept that and put the safety of the workforce and the community first.
And how is the workforce taking it, and what has the company done? I believe it's a furlough situation, or how have you approached it?
It is. It's a furlough situation for virtually everyone in the company.
Right. And what has been the response from the workforce on their side? Because I imagine that it's also been really difficult for them to take as well.
They've been hugely supportive. They've understood what we needed to do. And I think generally speaking, people are happy with what we've done. Mm-hmm. There are people who are keen and looking forward to getting back into work. And there are others who, for their own reasons and their own circumstances, are very happy to be furloughed as long as possible. So we've got to take into account that not everybody's in the same situation. There's people with young children at home. There's people with vulnerable people at home. There's people who are vulnerable themselves. So everybody's situation is different.
And if the mill's not working, if you can't produce, can you still sell? What's the situation there?
We can sell a tiny bit, so we can still do a little bit of e-commerce. The way our e-commerce is set up means that the people working there can work pretty much in isolation from each other, which is great. So we can still satisfy some of our customers at once needs, but that's nothing compared to the volume that we would normally output. Even our e-commerce sales are smaller than our store sales, and the private label business clearly is not happening at all. So the manufacturing for other people isn't going on. So we do have a little bit of revenue coming in for that, but nothing of consequence at this time of year compared to the overall business.
And for businesses in general, how long can they stay shut for? Because I was having this conversation in a previous interview, and I was talking with this person about how great it's going to be when everything starts back up again. Yet I have this fear that we don't know exactly when that's going to be, and how long can businesses survive for?
I'm speaking to a lot of people running businesses at the moment, and generally the feeling seems to be most can manage 2 months. At 3 months, you start seeing massive rates of fallouts of businesses going into liquidation. It's just the cycle seems to work out like that. But clearly, it's really different from sector to sector, and it's very often different from company to company. I mean, we entered this situation with no long-term borrowing in the company. We've always tried to operate without reliance on banks, etc. So we were in a pretty good situation to start with, but obviously every month that you're closed down, the cash reduces, and it becomes more challenging.
Also, in the present situation, I imagine the definition of what a successful business or a successful business day might be like has changed as well. What does success mean for you at the moment, or what is a success for you right now?
You know, the challenges we're facing now are so multifaceted. There are things that connect with the ongoing business. So the e-commerce, for example, development of new collections. So things around that. There are things around planning for the future startup, and how that works. And obviously we're working through those processes. There are things on what we do once we start up in terms of the recovery process and getting orders out. And then there are things that we're doing in relation to the very long term or the medium term, and what business looks like as we go into, say, 2021, for example. So there's a lot of different things that we're doing at the moment. And generally speaking, we'll spend each day a period of time on each of those. But one will tend to be the focus. So, you know, today we spent a lot of time, in fact, yesterday, I would say we spent a lot of time looking at what our collections will be like when we return, because clearly there's going to be a shorter selling season for spring. There's going to be spring product carried over into next year. There's going to be an autumn winter season, which then gets pushed back as well. So a lot of different logistical changes that we have to think through from a product standpoint.
And how does that affect your daily schedule? I imagine that you probably can't work from your office. You probably can't travel to meet people. So how is your time now organized? How do you structure your work?
Yeah, it's hugely different. I mean, I used to spend a lot of time traveling and meeting and so forth. I'm working from home at the moment and have been doing for a few weeks. I spend a lot of time on video conferences with people. Luckily, the technology is generally pretty good, so we can keep in good contact. There's a lot of information being shared between companies at the moment. There's a lot of discussion and planning going on in this phase. And there is still quite a lot to do. You know, I actually am surprised at how busy this period is and how busy I think it will continue to be up until we go back.
So we understand the present situation is a tough situation. Now, in my research for this interview, I noticed that you had written some articles, one of which was called Fit for Business. And in that, you describe having a health problem that helped you reflect on the way that you worked. And I was wondering if any of these problems that you had in the past maybe had helped you with the present situation, any of the knowledge or experience that you'd gained and carried forward.
So yeah, I had a fairly serious brain injury about 4 years ago. And as a result of that, I had to sort of learn to accept what my limitations are, and learn to pace myself and to look after myself better than I had been doing. And I think that's particularly important right now. Now that we're facing all these pressures as business leaders, we've got a lot of decisions to make, which we've never really had to make decisions of this magnitude at this pace with so many different dimensions before. And it's very tempting to go, well, I'm going to work, 24 hours on this. I'm going to, burn the candle at both ends. And there's this myth that that's what you need to do, and that's what makes a successful business person. I think it's a load of nonsense. I think it's more important that you look after yourself, that you bring the best version of yourself. And you can't do that if you're exhausted, and you can't think clearly if you're not looking after your brain and not looking after your health.
In that context, what does it take to be both a good CEO and look after yourself? What do you need to do?
I think realistically, you cannot be good at your job if you don't look after yourself. If you were a sprinter, for example, and you said, I'm training up to be in the Olympics. So every night this week, I've stayed awake all night, training all through the night. I've not been to sleep. I've had 3 hours sleep last night, 2 hours sleep the night before. Nobody's going to look at that and go, well, they've been working really hard. They're going to do fantastically in that 100 meters. So realistically, our brain is just the same. And if we don't look after it, if we don't give it breaks, if we don't take the pressure off ourselves in some way, then we don't perform to our best. And it's very, very clear. And I was lucky enough in some ways. I had a brain injury, which meant I experienced acute pain whenever I was overloading my brain. And as a result of that, I really understood when I was doing too much and when I had to break up my day, do different things at certain times, take the pressure off after I'd been traveling, look at how I organize my schedules differently, and just had to run things in a different way.
Do you think that was your brain telling you that you were doing too much?
I think I was doing the wrong things. So, you would have back-to-back meetings, and you do that for a full day, and you think that was a great schedule. And actually, if you broke that schedule up with things that are a little bit lighter, but still necessary, like catching up with your operations director or walking through the factory, then that becomes a much better schedule. If I was away working and traveling long haul for a week, the next day would be packed with every single thing that I hadn't done over that last week. Now, I'm not bringing my best self back into work after I've been on a long haul flight and arrive back at 11 o'clock at night. So the best thing to do is to give yourself a little space in that schedule. You maybe still be there at work, but doing some different things, and try and recover and try and take account of the fact that you do have to recover. It's not an infinite resource, your brain power, you've got to give it some breaks.
And how do you, within the position you're in, stay motivated and inspired to do the work? Because people must be looking to you for advice. They must be looking to you for the right direction to go in, for ideas. How do you feed yourself so that you can feed other people?
In normal circumstances, the inspiration comes from two things. It comes from the people, because the people are hugely motivated and energetic, and it gives you that buzz every time you connect with the people in the company. And it comes from the product, because I think we all in Johnstons love the product we do. We love the beauty of it, the feel of it, the creativity of it. In this current situation, different, not got that day-to-day interaction, or if we have, it's on a computer screen. And we've not got our hands on the product. We might see pictures of them, but we're having to imagine them. So it is different, but we're looking forward to that situation where we can get back in front of people and we can present the latest beautiful creation and get that feeling again. But there's no doubt it's more difficult without that lift that you get when you meet a customer and you present them with a product. Wow, that's beautiful. I've never seen anything like that before. That really boots up your energy, and we're not getting that at the moment. Now, there's plenty of tasks in front of us, so from that side, we've got, there's lots to get on with. but those highs that you get are not there at the moment.
So those highs are obviously a very enjoyable part of the work, but not every part of everybody's job is enjoyable. So, what are the difficult elements for you? Are there some things that are hard for you to push through that maybe you don't enjoy in the work?
Honestly, in this job, not really. I do love every aspect of this job. It's always changing. Every day, there's a new challenge. I mean, we're working with the best brands in the world. We're creating something which is unique and beautiful and creative in an area that I love. The team of people are fantastic and very, very positive and enthusiastic about what they do. So there's not a lot that I can say that I don't like. I mean, I'm not massively keen at getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get on the 7 o'clock flight from Inverness to London, but I'm not doing that at the moment, at least.
What are the unique issues or problems of working within a luxury industry? If we for a moment put aside the obvious present situation, what is unique about this luxury clothing business?
I mean, the amazing thing is, we are working with the luxury brands in Paris, in London, in Milan, and we're working with brands at the top of their game. And they're the most demanding companies in the world. They expect the highest quality. They expect constant innovation. They expect delivery to be perfect. So everything you do has to be top notch. But when you work with them, they are very supportive if you do a good job. So they will continually challenge us. They'll continually ask more from us. But at the end of the day, when we work with them, we've got a tremendous loyalty. So there is this huge relationship, which is multifaceted. It's not a relationship between me and them or between the sales manager and them. It's everybody that they touch and connect with in the company is creating that relationship. So when our customers come around the mills now, they will stop and talk to every employee that they see, and they'll ask, how are things? What's work like? And I'm very, very fortunate that the team members are always very positive and very pleased to have customers engaging with them like that. So it is different from most manufacturing, to be honest. It's a high input but highly rewarding area.
How do you handle that concept of needing to be perfect without having too much stress involved in that kind of situation? I only say that because me myself, I'm a pedant about certain things, but that only just causes stress for me sometimes.
Yeah. Well, of course, in certain manufacturing areas and textiles and particularly natural fibers are one of them. Although you might want to be perfect and your customers might want you to be perfect, there's a certain variability in the manufacturing. We're talking about products that come off the back of a sheep or a goat. And that means that depending on whether it rained that day or the winter was good or whatever, you will have differences which flow right through the manufacturing process. So there are tolerances, there are measures that we need to make right the way through the process. And we're extremely good at that. So that is where our expertise come in. And to be honest with you, if it wasn't difficult, we wouldn't exist. I mean, the reason a company like Johnstons can exist in a country like Scotland, where we do have a higher labor costs than China or Bangladesh or whatever, is because the process is difficult and because getting it absolutely right has a value. So the skills of our people are what we transfer into that product and can make the best product in the world.
Do you think that an element of the ability to do that comes from this area or this region or Scottish culture or British culture, that we can actually do that here? Because I'm pretty sure this wouldn't be possible everywhere.
I think it wouldn't. I mean, the fashion capitals of the world are major cities and they're very fast moving. And the cultures of the companies who live there are incredibly fast moving and they're always looking to change. that's not our culture, really. We like beautiful things, whether it's whiskey that's matured for 20 years or whether it's cashmere that's been really hand processed right the way through the process using our machinery, as well as the latest technology sometimes as well. So getting it right, getting it perfect really fits how we work. The challenge is sometimes you're working with this fashion world and you've got this incredible craftsmanship, and to get those chairs to come to can be challenging.
You mentioned technology. How has changing technology and the speed of technology affected the business and the industry?
It's definitely affecting it more and more. We have a business which has really been built on the same skills for a couple of hundred years. So we've been working on the weaving process, which is very, very similar to how it will always have been. It's just been automated and sped up and various technological improvements, but it's basically the same process. Now, more recently, the technology that's come in on the design side, on the dyeing side, on the weaving, on the finishing, has accelerated more and more. So we're seeing disruptions coming in. We're seeing the need to invest more and more ahead of the competition to create continually that newness. Lots of the products that we have out in the market at the moment have been based on technology that we didn't have 3 years ago. And it's hugely important that we can continue to do that. And the pace of change is speeding up all the time.
How do you manage to stay ahead of the competition? That is, of course, assuming that you have competition.
Yeah, we do. I think everyone has competition at the end of the day, and how you define that competition is interesting as well, because not everybody who makes a scarf is necessarily our direct competition, but we all have only one neck, and we like to keep it warm. So we do have competition. Our most similar competitors are mostly in Italy. So we're not very often competing with UK companies, although there are a few excellent companies who we do come across. But most of the other leading textile mills in the world are based in Italy.
Why? Why is that? Why is Italy a center for something like that? Do we know?
It's a good question, because actually, these industries, the industrial revolution and the dis of these industries is very much in the UK. They migrated to Italy after we had established them. But I think what has helped them thrive there is that they've had a high proportion of family-run businesses. And family-run businesses very often take a long-term view on investments. They keep up investment during the bad times and the good times, and they sustain those businesses. That long-term perspective is very healthy in textile manufacturing. It's a very cyclical business, but it does need a lot of investment over a long period of time. But fashions change, so the results will change from time to time as well.
I saw in a recent article the term fast fashion, and I thought that was really interesting. I think it was the Forbes article that was written, or the interview with you. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what is fast fashion from your perspective.
Most of the clothes that most of us wear have been made in either Bangladesh or China. So T-shirts are mostly made in Bangladesh, for example. Shirts are mostly made in China now. And they're made in a way which means that they can be made as cheaply as possible. They are shipped very often more than once around the world, because one application will be done in one country and another one will be done in another country. And they're made to be disposable. They're not designed necessarily to last. They're to capture a moment and to be sold cheaply. Now, that's really the opposite of what we do. We are making products. They're not necessarily affordable for everyone, although, some people can afford them for special occasions or for gifts or whatever. But they are designed to last. They are designed, we do not want somebody to buy our product, wear it for a season, and then throw it away. That's not the intention. We want to make something beautiful which goes into their wardrobe and comes out every autumn or comes out whenever they have a special occasion, and that they love it. You know, it's a completely different philosophy. So we see ourselves really as the antithesis of fast fashion, not because everybody's going to wear cashmere jackets all the time, but because there is a place for something which is beautiful and high quality and luxury and long lasting.
Do you have a favorite product that you produce personally? Is it something that your company makes that you're like, wow, that's great?
I can't say I do. I mean, if you asked me that question, I gave an honest answer. I'd probably tell you exactly what I'd seen that last week. What I really, really enjoy is the new thing. I'm addicted to we've never done this before. Nobody's ever done this before. This is a new technique that we've only just developed, and we think it's really exciting. You know, I love that side of it. I love the idea that every week or every month we are producing things that have never been made in the world and nobody's ever seen before. And not just from a design point of view, something intrinsic within the product, which is technically different and brings a new aesthetic or a new property.
How does the age of the company affect the processes and business practices of the company? It must be hard sometimes to upgrade and change and move on when a company is so old.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. The way we view it is you don't get to be 203 years old by staying in. You know, most of the companies that ran 200 years ago, 90% of them will have disappeared. You know, the companies that survive are those who change better. So innovation has been something we've done since, you said in the introduction, talked about estate tweeds. We were the first company to process cashmere in the UK. Innovation has been one of our values really since the very early days. And I think longevity, if you look at companies that have lasted a long while, they've done that by changing. They've done that by innovating. They've not done that by staying the same. The world is changing all the time, and it's changing even faster now. So, we will have to continue to meet that.
Do you think there are any limits to a company's ability to expand and grow? Once again, with the exception of the present situation, where when a government decides that you can't work for whatever reason, then you can't work, right? But outside of that, assuming that we're going to return to normal, is there a limit? Is there, like, you can only sell to so many people in one country or something, or is there an ever increasing and growing market? Can you move into new countries? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for a company of our size, we're not huge, so there is always opportunities, there are always new markets, and there is always growth. Maybe not right at this moment, but normally there is always growth somewhere in the world. So there is opportunities there. The question for me more is how fast should you grow? Because if your vision is to have a business that has longevity and has stability and continues to generate value and good jobs in the area, how important is a high level of growth to you? It's useful to have some level of growth because your costs will tend to rise, but you don't necessarily have to look for 20, 50% growth. And actually, if you do that, probably what you have to do in some ways is you cannibalize your reputation, maybe to go down market a little bit, or you push for that high volume opportunity. There might be times when it's right to do that, but driving for growth as the principal thing is possibly a bad choice in a luxury market, because you'll have to compromise on some of those values to do it.
What makes a luxury a luxury?
Yeah, that's a question. That's a question that we ask a lot. And luxury is an overused term. I mean, anything can be a luxury. And what's a luxury really depends on what it is to you. For me, sitting here looking over the fields of Moray is a luxury. It's a wonderful thing, and something I wouldn't have if I was living in the center of London, for example. So it's what's important to you. For something to be to command a premium as a product, there has to, I think, to be more than the product itself behind it. There has to be that aura of craftsmanship and authenticity and the place that it comes from. So with products, I think it's really important that they have a bit of a story behind them, you know, something which is intrinsically more interesting just than here is that mouse mat. You know, it's not just another one stamped off of a production line. There's an aura to something that's luxurious.
So if you had a magic wand and could wave it, and with the magic wand change one thing about your industry to make it better, what would you change?
What we've suffered as an industry over the last, I would say, 50, 60 years is that we had too much capacity for the business that was available for us. So we had a long period of time where companies were competing very heavily on price. They were competing with manufacturers in Bangladesh and China, which is impossible to do on price. And so there was a limited investment. You know, the investment is really important to us. Technology is really important to us, and you need to keep ahead of that. So if I could change one thing about the industry as a whole, it would be to take the investment level up. Big problem for the UK and for Scotland is just the same, is that we haven't had enough investment in our manufacturing over a long period of time. And that does pay dividends in the end. And it is purely, you know, manufacturing is very much a game of generate the results, generate the returns, invest in your people and invest in your equipment, and you will get the results. So that lack of investment over a period of time of 60, 70 years is really important, but that's something we need to reverse.
Is this, you're talking about the company's investment or people's investment in the company, or what does the company need to invest in more specifically?
Companies need to invest in two things. One is in their people. You know, we are all dependent on the skills. And, you know, we say to the team, the one thing that determines how good a company we are in 5 years' time or 10 years' time is how much we invest in training and development today. So that's the number one. The second one is the equipment and the technology and how much money we can put into those changes, because they're all taking us forward. They're all making us more efficient. They're all giving you capabilities. And you've got to choose those investments very wisely and very carefully. You can easily waste a lot of money. But if you can make those choices and you create the capital to make those choices, then potentially you can stay ahead of the competition. If you're not in a situation to invest, then really, you know, it's just a matter of time before you fall off the pace. And eventually you will be one of the casualties.
In times like these right now, businesses are suffering to a certain extent. Is there something that the community could do to support businesses more at this present time?
I mean, it depends on the business, obviously, what the communities can do. I think the biggest thing we can all do for each other is give ourselves a little bit of a break, rather than people maybe rushing to judgment about what a company is doing or not doing, and looking for people to blame or scapegoat. Is we just hold back a little bit, try and understand their situation, and understand that generally speaking, most of the business leaders out there are trying to do the thing by their people, and they're trying to do it in the best way that they can.
On a personal level, in terms of influence and recommendations and maybe practicality, what book would you recommend for people to read that would maybe help them in their business or with personal development?
So the one book that stands out for me out of all the books that I've either had to read or I've chosen to read is Good to Great. And Good to Great is different from the other books in terms of it's written as a empirical analysis of what does and doesn't work over a long period of time. So it's not based on case studies. It's not based on a leader standing up and saying, this is why I'm so great and this is what I've done. It's based on real analysis of how companies perform for a long period of time and what makes those companies really perform. And the interesting thing is that really means that it comes up with different conclusions from the conclusions that you get if you ask leaders to tell their story. And it concludes, for example, that the best leaders normally come from within a company. They're normally not parachuted in from outside.
Considering what you just said, how does it feel to have to come then into a company knowing that that might be a very difficult decision for the company to make?
There's no doubt if the opportunity had been there at the time for somebody to have had all the skills and had all the abilities and to have spent their last 30 years within Johnstons and to know everything about Johnstons, that would have probably been the best choice. Now, there didn't happen to be somebody like that around at the time, and obviously a lot of my experience was relevant. Sometimes a different perspective can be useful, but I think one of the first things that we fail in as leaders is we rush into jobs and we try and change things within, we talk about the first 100 days, and we come in full of enthusiasm and new ideas, but very limited understanding. And really, we've got to listen to what the people who are there know and can tell us about the business before we should move, so we should be taking our time and paying respects. I mean, we've got brilliant people in Johnstons who've been there more than 20 years, more than 30 years. Some of them are in their second, third generation. They know more about the company than I will ever know. And I would be very foolish if I didn't listen to their views.
It's a great answer. Do you think in general, most CEOs are able to listen to all the people around them in the company, or is that a more difficult skill for them to acquire?
I think any leader gets tempted to conform to a stereotype. And that stereotype is very much action orientated. It's, here's me, I'm the leader, I'll make the decision. It's not glamorous to talk about collaboration, to make decisions collectively as a team. That image that we create of the person who goes on the front of Time magazine or whatever, and they're the person, they're the one. That's not a real view on how most businesses operate. And I don't think it's a view on how businesses should operate either. I think the best decisions are the ones that we make collectively. The best situation is that the team is looking at the situation, sharing ideas, feels they can be open to challenge, and we get to something better as a result of that. If we were relying just on my expertise, that's not enough. This is far too complicated a business. This is far too difficult an environment to rely on one person. And, we certainly wouldn't be doing what we're doing if it was just me.
Very interesting answer. I've seen recently that some larger organizations, predominantly in Western culture, are employing what they call a CHO, a Chief Heart Officer, to run inside the business alongside Chief Technical Officer and Chief Financial Officer. Do you have a perspective on ideas like that?
Sorry, what was the job title there?
It's a CHO, a Chief Heart Officer. Basically, their job is to harmonize the work of the people within the organization, making sure that everyone's on the same page and ensuring that there are less conflicts that arise.
Yeah. I think initiatives like that can be very positive if they're genuine, if they're authentic. If this is something that the company recognizes that need and has the right person and it evolves naturally, that can be great. They can also be really gimmicky, and companies follow these trends, and we all have a different terminology that we adopt, which probably means the same as the thing that we did last year. Generally speaking, if a company's trying to, you've got to do these things for real. You can't just say, well, the rest of us are all complete swines, but we've got a chief heart officer and they're going to look after things. The values have to go through the whole organization. And, I think when I joined Johnstons, the values of the company were very apparent. They're not values I carried in with me. They were values that were there, and they were around community and innovation and trust and craftsmanship, and they already existed. And they were ones that I was very happy to adopt, but I'd have been very foolish to come along and go, well, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do something totally different, because changing cultures takes an awful long time. Bringing out the best in the culture is, I think, what we can more normally hope for.
Your office is on fire. Everyone gets out okay, but you can only grab one thing as you rush out the door. What do you pick up? So
when I left my last company, I used to work running a company that made kitchen sinks in Falkirk and also in Slovakia and in the Netherlands. When I left that company, my operations director gave me a gift from the company, which was a granite kitchen sink, a little model version of one, maybe about 30 centimeters long. But he'd actually crafted that in his own garage. And it meant so much that somebody, when you work with people, you get on with them in a work environment, but for somebody actually to take their personal time and give it to that was very special. And I think at the end of the day, business is personal. It isn't just about transactions. It's about the relationships you form. And when you get an indication that that relationship goes beyond the needs of business, that's very special.
You mentioned Slovakia and the Netherlands. Did you get any experience about how work and the working environment is out in those countries, whether it's similar to Britain or Scotland or different?
Yeah, I did. And it's been one of the things I've really enjoyed with my career. I've spent a lot of time traveling in different countries, whether working there and running companies there or just for the commercial sales side of it out in different countries. The Netherlands was reasonably similar to the UK in a lot of ways, although they have their what they call the tall poppy syndrome. So they don't like people to overachieve. They like to keep the community at a similar level. Slovakia was more challenging because it was still emerging from the communist era, and there were problems with alcoholism, there were problems with labor relations, there was all sorts of difficulties around that. But it was interesting all the same, and some great people there. It just took a little bit longer to get on their wavelength and to really be accepted by them, because you very much were the outsider.
Absolutely, and I think that work within other countries also gives us a greater perspective on the good things that we have here.
Very much. I mean, you've gone through the same experience, I know, but traveling overseas to work and then coming back, suddenly you realize, or you view things about Scotland and the Scottish workforce that you maybe didn't see before if you just grew up here. And it's made me appreciate the great things that we have. I remember being told once by an American chief executive that he couldn't understand the Scottish workforce because when he made a speech, nobody cheered and clapped and hollered. And when he did that in the US, everybody going out going, "Yeah, we're great, off we go." And I said, when they stand there and they ask you questions and they interrogate the strategy you've put forward, that's a good sign. That's because we're trying to work out how to do something. So the moment that you really need to worry is when we're quiet, because that's when they think you're a complete idiot and we're just going to ignore what you say and do whatever we like.
Yeah. So that's a warning. Silence is not always golden, right?
And silence is definitely not golden, no.
Right. Wow. Time travel is possible. Where would you go and why?
So, when we look at this time compared to other times, it's very easy to feel that when we see everything on the television that's going wrong, and we do have big challenges around sustainability. We do have the current coronavirus crisis, and we do have all sorts of problems in the world, and it's not perfectly peaceful. But this is the most peaceful we've ever been. This is the healthiest we've ever been. This is the most people we've ever taken out of poverty. So we are in good times compared to how they've ever been. And I really wouldn't want to go back, because it's all fine and well to say you go back and, you know, you can be the Pharaoh of Egypt or whatever. But the reality is there were many people building a pyramid for that Pharaoh, and that's a reality of life for most people. I think today we do have a lot of things going for us, and we should be, you know, appreciative of that we do have a relatively good world, and hopefully it will continue that way, and hopefully it will get better for our children and our children's children.
Absolutely. I totally agree. What kind of legacy do you think you will leave behind, either in your work or in your business?
Legacy is a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's quite a big challenge to say, well, what will it look like when you go? I mean, I worked in my company that made kitchen sinks. We worked there for 5 years. And when I left, I remember walking out the factory gates and looking back and seeing life going on as normal. And it did, you know, it went on as normal. People still made the sinks, people still produced things. And you can overstate your own importance. I would love to think that as part of my time with Johnstons, I've enabled people to do the best work that they can do, and that hopefully the company is thriving after I've gone, despite the current challenges that everyone is facing. So, you know, I would love to be able to sit retired, hopefully somewhere in Moray, looking at it and seeing Johnstons as a very successful company, with a chief executive who's doing a much better job than I ever did.
Wow. Thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate having the opportunity to ask you some questions and listen to the answers. If people would like more information about Johnstons or like to find out about your work, where can they go to get more information?
They can go to our website and they can see lots of information there about our history and heritage, and obviously our products as well, on www.johnstonsofελgin.com. Or if you want to talk to me about business or hear what I'm thinking about in business, I do keep fairly up to date on LinkedIn, so you'll find me on there.
Super. So once again, thank you very much for your time today. I wish you great success with all of your business ventures in the future, and I hope that we get a chance to talk again.
Thank you, G.
Thank you very much.
Made in Moray is a product of the Academy of Language Therapy and Life Coaching. Book a free online personal or professional development consultation today. What are you waiting for?